The Motorola G200 might be the most powerful phone you can buy for $300 US, but the Poco X4 GT might be the better device since the G200 disappoints in one key area. Here are the main takeaways. The Motorola G200 5G has a slightly better camera, larger screen, an almost stock Android operating system, and much better carrier compatibility in the States. The Poco X4 GT has better battery life, faster charging speeds, and longer update support. But which is faster? It's too close to call. Both are speedy, and moving around the interface, opening apps, and unlocking with the side-mounted fingerprint scanners are pleasingly quick. Fast performance is what you would expect from the almost flagship hardware. A Snapdragon 888 Plus processor in the Moto, and a newer MediaTek Dimensity 8100 in the Poco, with either 128 or 256 gigs of UFS 3.1 storage and 8 gigs of LPDDR5 RAM. For benchmarks, you'll almost never notice a real-world difference, but the Poco does come out ahead technically. The G200 wins in Geekbench single-core performance, but loses in multi-core. X4 GT barely wins 3D Mark Wildlife, but if you're worried about overheating and throttling, the Poco easily wins, maintaining 91% of its peak performance after 45 minutes of the CPU throttling test and an 88% stability score after 20 minutes of Wildlife's GPU stress test. The Moto does a pretty good job compared to some other recent Snapdragon 8 series devices, but it still has to throttle to 68% and it ends up with a 10% lower Wildlife stress test stability score. As far as gaming, both phones are more than capable of playing demanding titles like Genshin and Asphalt at higher detail settings and frame rates, as well as PUBG and Call of Duty of course. I did test Off-Road Legends 2 just to make sure that both would run well at 144Hz, and they did. Both devices have pretty typical gaming modes, and if you're looking for strong gaming phones on a budget, these are two amazing options. One thing to note for data speed and coverage: if you're looking to use the X4 GT in the States, you'll most likely be restricted to T-Mobile and some T-Mobile carriers like Mint Mobile. The Poco just doesn't have enough frequency bands to work very well with AT&T or Verizon. The Moto has almost all the bands that are commonly used in the US, and I expect it to work well on most carriers. Which has the better screen? Neither. Just kidding. But it really comes down to what you prefer. They're that similar. Both are LCD with the same FHD Plus resolution and an impressive buttery smooth top refresh rate of 144Hz, as well as adaptive options. The Moto has a higher touch sampling rate of 285Hz at that 144Hz refresh rate compared to the Poco's 142Hz touch sampling rate, which means gamers may prefer the Moto. If you're looking for the bigger screen, the G200 is a 6.8-inch monster, while the X4 GT at 6.6 inches is noticeably easier to hold. There are some drawbacks to the Moto, like how at 550 nits in direct sunlight, it's a bit dim. Still usable for sure, but the Poco is brighter at around 600 nits, and it does make a difference. Also, the Moto only has some kind of tempered glass for protection instead of Gorilla Glass 5 like the X4 GT. What about the cameras? The G200 wins, but not drastically. I have a full camera review for the X4 GT that I'll link in the description, but I suggest installing Gcam on either device because it can absolutely help with photos, especially at night. I'll leave a link to both Gcam ports I used in the description. From left to right, we have the stock Moto camera, Gcam on the Moto, Gcam on the Poco, and the stock Poco camera. I feel like the Moto typically looks a little more natural and detailed, which makes sense since it's using a 108 megapixel main camera compared to the Poco's 64 megapixel shooter, but some of the shots do look a little strange. Like this selfie from the Selfie Camera, where Gcam looks considerably better than the Moto's stock camera. At night, you have to use Gcam, at least on the Moto. Less noise and a smoother bokeh effect. By the way, Gcam on the Poco actually looks closest to real life for this silver band shot, since the closest light is a very orange street lamp. If this video has been helpful so far, please give it a like, and thank you for that. Video separates these devices more than photo quality. Both can produce usable 4K footage, but the Moto can also shoot okay 8K footage. Unfortunately, the selfie cameras are limited to 1080, at least using the stock camera app. Luckily, Filmic Pro can improve that resolution and offer lots of manual control. But if you want to shoot raw video with motion cam, you're gonna want to go with the Moto, which consistently shoots at up to 30 FPS, where the Poco basically tops out at 17 FPS. It's not a great look. For audio quality, both phones are similar in terms of volume, which is loud enough, but the Poco has stereo speakers. Neither sound fantastic, but I think the Moto sounds slightly more full. I didn't have any issues with Bluetooth pairing, but if you prefer a headphone jack, the X4 GT still has you covered, unlike the G200. How about the batteries? The Poco wins this category easily, with its included 67-watt charger and fantastic battery life. The Poco has a 5080 mAh battery, which is only slightly larger than the 5000 mAh from the Moto, but the Poco with its MediaTek chip lasts me about 2 days with my typical use, where the Moto only lasts a day and a half. It'll also take longer to fill that battery back up on the Moto with its slower 33-watt charging, but at least both companies still include a charger in the box. The X4 GT takes about 50 minutes to charge from 1 to 100%, the Moto around an hour and 15 minutes. What about the software experience? This is where Motorola is just really frustrating. A lot of reviewers are pleased with the stockish version of Android that Moto uses, and to be fair, there aren't a lot of pre-installed useless apps, and the interface generally looks clean and simple like a Pixel device. In fact, you can't even use third-party launchers like Nova with gesture navigation, which the Poco's MIUI for Poco flavor of Android does not allow. But I have problems with the recent apps menu and the peak display feature that Moto adds. On the recent apps menu, you have to swipe up from the bottom to get back to the home screen instead of just tapping anywhere else on the screen, which is different from Pixel's, Samsung's, OnePlus phones, and I think every recent device I've tried in the last 2 years. Now that's something you can get used to, but peak display is really terrible. Here's what peak display enables: tap to wake, lift to wake, lock screen media player controls, and lastly, the device will wake for notifications. But you have to press and hold the tiny notification icons to know more than if it's an email, text message, etc., which I don't like at all. When you tap on the X4 GT screen, you see your wallpaper, media controls if you have anything playing, and more information from notifications. You might be thinking, well then just don't use peak display. Unfortunately, that disables tap to wake, lift to wake, unless you're using Face ID, and all the Moto will do with incoming notifications is vibrate or play a notification sound. The screen stays dark. I can understand if Moto made peak display an option for those who really want to keep notifications more private, but they didn't make it optional. Typically, I would complain about MIUI's often confusing settings menu, plus the restriction about third-party launchers and gesture navigation, but you can at least still use the device like most phones with tap to wake, raise to wake, and it will wake for notifications. Oh, and I almost forgot to mention the haptics. Vibrations are pretty loose on the Moto, but nice and tight on the X4 GT. Now, apart from those issues, the Moto does have some nice additional features, like some of the Moto gestures where you can chop to turn the flashlight on and off, and twist to open the camera. Those are useful and not natively available on the Poco. Another trick is Moto's Ready For capability that allows you to output video from the USB-C port and sets up a simple PC environment, kind of like Samsung DeX. The Poco does win in terms of software support since it will receive OS updates up to Android 14, where the Moto will just hopefully receive Android 13. So this Motorola G200 5G is going to be a great phone for a lot of users, but its large size, dimmer screen, and odd software restrictions mean that it's just not the phone for me. I much prefer the easier to hold, faster charging Poco X4 GT. Honestly though, both of these phones are fantastic performance options at the $300 to $350 price point. If you think the Moto G200 is the right phone for you, you should check out Wireless Place, since they have Motorola and Poco devices, as well as phones from Xiaomi, Samsung, OnePlus, and more. I've bought a few phones from Wireless Place, and they always ship fast and internationally, have great prices, include a US adapter for the charger if you need it, and now they accept Bitcoin and Ethereum. Please use my discount code PC10 when you check out if you want to support the channel or just want to save a little money. A link to the site is in the description. Click right here for my X4 GT versus Pixel 6a comparison. It's exciting. And please subscribe if you want to see more content like this. And feel free to comment with any questions you might have, and I will answer them perfectly. I said perfectly.